So, one of the benefits of accreditation for landlords, well, in addition to what we've talked about in the text so far, the landlords are able to, if they're accredited, they're known as being good landlords, and so they're often drawn upon as a local authority consultee. So if the local authority is wanting to change the way in which it operates some of its regulatory functions, bring in some new regulation in the form of maybe a discretionary licensing scheme, or change its tier of its training or its tiers of fees or something like that, then it means that landlords are more likely to, accredited landlords are more likely to form a body which the local authority can go to and say, here, this is what we fancy doing, what do you think about it? And so landlords actually get to have some kind of say in the way in which they are regulated as a body. That good working partnership that they have with the local authority means that we've got, rather than a sort of us and them approach between the regulated landlords and letting agents and the local authority as the regulator, you've got much more cooperative approach with the local authority. If the local authorities finds that this is working for them, then it means that you're likely to get a much more distributed set of enforcement approaches, in which the local authority might choose, for instance, a negotiation first and enforcement last protocol, particularly in dealing with landlords that have previously demonstrated themselves to be good operators through gaining accreditation. So it's not a given. You won't say the local authority is guaranteed never to move to more firmer legal action against accredited landlords, but it's they will consider their accredited status when they're making enforcement decisions. Landlords also feel more confident to go to the local authority when they want to ask questions or get opinions on their properties, and so they feel safer to be able to approach the regulator without the fear of receiving an enforcement action as a direct result of talking to the regulator. So they are able to sort of open themselves up a bit and get some advice. And the legislation around the private rented sector is so complex that they really do need to have this advice. And actually, most of the malfeasance, most of the non-compliance with the legislation doesn't arise from this idea of rogue landlords getting and causing problems. And there are definitely a minority of poor operators, but actually it's the majority of what are usually small scale landlords doing this as a second income, which is the majority of UK landlords, who need plenty of advice and guidance and support to be able to make sure that they are complying with everything they're supposed to do. The local authority, as we said before, acknowledges good private rented sector standards, but actually if they do that more publicly through these schemes, then that enhances the reputation and the image of the private rented sector, which often has a very negative public image. It can also enhance the market. It can make people more confident in the local private rented sector market. For the landlords, if they're on the list of accredited landlords, then they can be set up to receive newsletters and emails and other notifications. Sometimes they have landlord forums which you can set up through the accreditation scheme, in which there might be regular monthly or every 6 month meetings in which guests can be brought in to talk about everything from new piece of legislation in the pipeline through to tax arrangements and how to deal with deposit disputes, helping to further improve the landlord's practice and engage them more effectively with the management of their properties in a positive way. The same goes with letting agents. If you've got someone that you can communicate directly with, staff running the accreditation scheme, if they've got a connection with the local authority, then it makes it easier to access local authority services. For instance, if you're trying to deal with problems around benefit or a tenant that has extra support needs, or you've got issues with waste or antisocial behaviour at your property. It gives you someone at the council as a landlord or a letting agent that you can call on and say, hey, I need somebody in your organisation to help me with X. And trying to get that sort of access to those sorts of services directly through the council central switchboard when you ring up a sort of cold calling type approach can be quite difficult. So having someone on the inside makes a big difference. So these one-to-one advice services are very helpful. And finally, benefits for landlords is the local authority might choose to, as a further incentive to get people involved with their accreditation schemes, can be to offer some what are used to be grants are now more likely to be low interest loans in order to cover some of the works that they require to get themselves into a state where not only are they legally compliant, but they're also ready to be accredited. And so they're getting a bit of assistance from the local authority on condition that they get their property into a state where it's accredited, or the landlord management into a state where they can be accredited. Sometimes some more progressive schemes have managed to arrange group discounts with insurance providers in order to provide some advantageous terms for landlords in their area that are privy to their accreditation schemes. So a win for both parties there. The insurance scheme get extra custom, and the landlords or letting agents get cheaper business costs. If you have a lot of work, particularly I mentioned with housing benefits and the introduction of universal credit, the single benefit payment that's being made, then you find that there's a lot of questions around landlords for this, and so landlords and letting agents and the benefits services within the council can be brought together in order to try to help either side of them with working through the paperwork required to look after tenants that are in receipt of these benefits, and to try to promote the use of renting out of properties to tenants in receipt of some of these supports, as they are a group that can be discriminated against by local landlords and letting agents, and these tenant groups. Talked about assistance with antisocial tenants, and very much this is a teamwork approach with the landlords. Deposit bond guarantee schemes are a type of scheme where if you've got a tenant that's in housing need, they're homeless, then the local authority can offer to accredited landlords that they know are going to provide good quality accommodation an agreement on paper where they will pay up to the value of a standard deposit should the landlord take on that tenant on the housing benefit, and that saves then the landlord having to require a cash deposit to be paid, and it means that the tenant who would be unable to raise the cash deposit is able to access private rented sector accommodation, improving their chances of rehousing. Finally, it's a bit of peace of mind it can be offered to landlords, knowing that you've got a property which is accredited, and therefore you know because of that status you're complying with everything you need to do, so you're not falling foul of the legislation. And if you bring in licensing schemes, finally, it's for property licensing, it's very common to offer accredited landlords a discount of about 10% or so if they apply for a license through those schemes.